In the vastness of the universe, there were many civilizations, some older than the stars, others as young as newly formed planets. Some were peaceful, some were conquerors. But all the civilizations had one thing in common, a rule that had kept them safe for eons. The rule was simple, yet powerful. Do not wake the humans. It was said that humans were dangerous. They were unpredictable, relentless, and capable of achieving the impossible. Over centuries, rumors spread throughout the galaxy about their strength, their ability to fight, and the strange power they held within them. The rule was clear: don't disturb Earth, don't provoke the humans. For millennia, the universe followed this rule. No one dared approach Earth, let alone make contact. As the years passed, Earth became a forgotten corner of the universe, a planet untouched by galactic events. The humans lived their lives on their blue planet, unaware of the cosmic drama playing out beyond their skies. Little did they know, they were a powerful force, feared by beings across the stars. But not everyone believed in the rule. A faction of alien conquerors, the Zorathians, had heard the whispers. They had heard stories about humans being an unstoppable force, but they didn't believe them. They thought the stories were just that, stories. They had conquered worlds, destroyed civilizations, and ruled vast empires, yet they had never encountered humans. It was time to prove the galaxy wrong. The leader of the Zorathian fleet, Commander Zarthok, had grown tired of hearing about humans. His empire had crushed countless enemies, but the legend of the humans had lingered in his mind, gnawing at him. He wanted to know if the rumors were true. He wanted to see for himself what made humanity so feared. And so, he decided to break the rule. Zarthok gathered his fleet, and together they set their sights on Earth. The Zorathians were not an impulsive race. They were strategic, calculating, and ruthless. They believed that if they could invade Earth and subdue the humans, it would be a show of strength to the entire galaxy. It would prove that the universe had nothing to fear. The legend of the humans would be shattered. As their ships entered Earth's atmosphere, they didn't anticipate the challenges that awaited them. They didn't know how the humans would react or what they might be capable of. They simply assumed that Earth was just like any other planet they had conquered, a vulnerable world waiting to be claimed. But Earth was different. The first sign of trouble came when Zarthok's fleet tried to make contact with Earth's communication systems. The humans had been keeping a low profile, but their technology was far from primitive. In fact, they had developed systems that were beyond anything the Zorathians had ever encountered. The alien fleet tried to send a signal, only to find that the humans had already jammed their transmissions. It was then that Zarthok realized his mistake. He had underestimated humanity. His fleet continued to approach Earth, and that's when the second sign of trouble appeared. The humans, rather than cowering in fear, began to prepare for something. It wasn't just the government or the military, it was everyone. People across the world suddenly felt a strange pull, a sense of urgency that they had never experienced before. It was as if the very essence of humanity was awakening. At first, the Zorathians dismissed it. They thought it was just a fluke, a coincidence. But the closer they got to Earth, the stronger the feeling became. The planet was not as defenseless as they had believed. The humans were not the weak, unsuspecting creatures they had imagined. And then, just as Zarthok's fleet entered Earth's orbit, the unthinkable happened. A signal, an ancient signal, flashed across the galaxy, reaching the humans. It wasn't a message from the aliens, but something far older. The signal had been dormant for centuries, waiting for the right moment to be activated. It was a call to arms, a call to awaken humanity's hidden power. Across the globe, humans experienced a strange surge of energy. Their instincts, long suppressed by the peaceful age they had lived in, began to stir. Some heard it as a whisper in their minds. Others felt it as a pull in their hearts. The message was clear. They are coming. It's time to fight. Zarthok's fleet, now fully in orbit, began to panic. They had expected resistance, but nothing like this. The humans were not responding in the way they had anticipated. They were preparing for something. The aliens had underestimated the humans. They had broken the rule. Now the universe was about to witness what happened when humans were awakened. It was no longer a question of whether the humans would fight. It was about how far they would go to protect their home. The countdown had begun, and Zarthok realized that the biggest mistake the universe had ever made was waking the humans. The battle was coming. As the alien ships hovered ominously above Earth's atmosphere, a strange calm fell over the planet. People from every corner of the world felt the shift. It wasn't something they could explain, but it was undeniable. Something was happening. The air felt thicker, charged with a subtle energy that no one could ignore. Around the globe, people glanced up at the sky in confusion. They saw the ships, the silhouettes against the stars, but there was no panic. Instead, there was a strange growing feeling of purpose among the people. For centuries, humanity had lived in peace, surrounded by the comforts of civilization. But this moment, this precise moment, was different. The humans were no longer merely passive observers of the world. They were waking up to something far deeper, a connection to an ancient power that had been lying dormant for millennia. In the heart of every person, something was stirring, like an instinctual call to arms. But it was more than just survival. It was pride, strength, and unity. It was as if the human spirit had been waiting for this moment. And now, it was time to fight. The world's leaders scrambled to make sense of the alien invasion. Governments activated their defense protocols, military forces prepared their weapons, and scientists tried to understand the unknown technology that had breached Earth's orbit. But beneath all the organized chaos, something far greater was happening. Humanity was uniting in a way that had never been seen before. It was as if everyone, regardless of race, language, or nationality, was bound by a shared understanding that the battle ahead was not just for survival, it was for everything they held dear. On every continent, people trained, prepared, and readied themselves for what was coming. Soldiers readied their weapons, engineers rushed to build defenses, and civilians, who once felt helpless, now felt the adrenaline of purpose coursing through them. There was no longer any question of whether they could fight back. The question was how. In the skies, the Zorathian fleet watched in disbelief. They had never seen anything like this. Their sensors showed that the humans weren't retreating in fear. They were gathering, preparing. There was a sense of unity among them that was both unsettling and powerful. The aliens had thought Earth would be an easy conquest. After all, they had studied the planet for centuries, observing its people as they grew, but never interfering. They had seen the human weaknesses, divisions, conflicts, and vulnerabilities, but they had never understood the true power of humanity. Commander Zarthok, watching from his flagship, felt the gravity of the situation. His own confidence, once unshakable, began to waver. The humans were awakening, and their movements were unpredictable. The ancient stories had been vague, but now they seemed too real to ignore. He had broken the one rule that the universe had long respected, and it was costing him. Zarthok had never been one to back down. The Zorathians were conquerors. They were used to victory, used to bending the will of other species to their power. They had never failed before. But the humans were not responding as other species had. They weren't cowering or submitting. They were preparing for war. "Send a message to the fleet," Zarthok ordered, his voice steady, but tinged with uncertainty. "We attack at dawn." His officers scrambled to comply. They had superior technology, vast ships that could obliterate anything in their path. But still, they had doubts. The energy they felt from Earth was unlike anything they had encountered before. It was raw, untamed, and it was spreading across the planet. Back on Earth, humanity was not just preparing weapons. They were preparing themselves mentally and spiritually for what was coming. The hidden power inside them had been awakened, but it wasn't something that could be measured by technology or science. It was the human will, the will to survive, to fight, to protect their home. People gathered in groups, in cities, in villages, even in remote corners of the world, and they didn't need to speak to understand what was coming. There was a silent agreement among them. They would face the Zorathian fleet together, and they would not lose. Around the globe, ancient symbols began to appear in places where humans had once believed them to be mere myths. Symbols of warriors, leaders, and heroes. The power of unity was sweeping across the planet like a wildfire. No matter where they came from, no matter what differences had once divided them, the humans were now connected by something far greater than the ships in the sky. On every battlefield, in every moment of preparedness, humanity's resolve hardened. The Zorathians had made a grave mistake by breaking the rule. They had awakened a force that they were not prepared to face. As the Zorathian ships prepared for their assault, humanity's warriors stood ready, their spirits united. They were no longer a scattered, divided species. They were one, and they would show the universe that when humans are threatened, they do not bend, they do not break, they fight. The Zorathian fleet, with its colossal warships and advanced technology, moved closer to Earth's atmosphere. The humans had no idea what they were up against. They only knew that they had to fight to protect their planet, their families, and their way of life. No one could have predicted what would unfold next. The moment the Zorathians initiated their attack, the sky was filled with streaks of light as their weapons fired down at Earth's cities. Explosions rocked the surface, and the world seemed to tremble under the weight of the invasion. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was something extraordinary happening on the ground. From every corner of the earth, the warriors of humanity, those who had never wielded a weapon before, suddenly felt an overwhelming surge of power. They fought not only with their physical strength, but with an energy that flowed from deep within. The same raw energy that had united humanity in the face of the unknown now fueled their resistance. In every country, in every city, the humans responded with an intensity that shook the Zorathian forces. The aliens had assumed they would face the usual disorganized, terrified responses. Instead, they were confronted by warriors of a different kind, humans who fought not just to survive, but to protect what they loved. The first wave of Zorathian soldiers hit the ground with brutal force. Their weapons tore through buildings, their ships launching missiles at high speeds, and the air was thick with dust and smoke. But as they advanced, they encountered the unexpected. Human soldiers, armed with whatever they could find, makeshift weapons, outdated military tech, and sheer will, fought back with fierce determination. It was not just about strategy or numbers. It was about the heart of humanity, something the Zorathians had never accounted for. Commander Zarthok observed from the bridge of his flagship, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. "This can't be happening," he muttered. "They're fighting back, but they're not using our technology. They're using something else." His officers looked on, puzzled and concerned. "What do you mean, Commander?" one of them asked. "They're not just fighting with weapons," Zarthok replied, his voice grim. "It's as if they're tapping into a power we can't understand, something ancient." The Zorathians had underestimated Earth's resolve. They had believed the humans would crumble in the face of advanced weaponry. But instead, humanity's sheer will to survive and protect their home gave them a power beyond the reach of the invaders. In the heart of the battlefield, a young woman named Clara, who had never held a weapon in her life, found herself leading a group of survivors. She wasn't a soldier, but in the heat of the moment, she stepped up to guide those around her. She picked up a weapon, not because she was skilled, but because she couldn't let her people fall. "This is our home," she shouted, rallying the others around her. "We fight for our families, for our future." The humans fought not just as individuals, but as a collective force, united in a way that no alien race could ever comprehend. Meanwhile, in the sky, Earth's defense forces were joining the fray. Earth's outdated jets and military aircraft, once considered obsolete, were now flying in perfect coordination with the forces on the ground. They were guided by an unseen hand, their pilots moving as one unit, their mission clear: defend Earth at all costs. The Zorathian fleet tried to retaliate with its advanced weaponry, launching massive blasts at Earth's cities. But each time, it was met with unexpected resistance. The human ships, despite being far less advanced, were able to maneuver in ways that baffled the Zorathians. The humans seemed to predict every move, countering attacks with precision and speed that made no sense to the invaders. In the chaos, Zarthok's flagship was hit by a barrage of missile fire. "Shields at maximum," he ordered, but it was too late. The ship was shaking, and the damage was severe. The Zorathians had no choice but to fall back and regroup. The human resistance was more than they could handle, and for the first time in a long while, Zarthok felt a flicker of fear. "This is impossible," he muttered under his breath. "We are the most powerful force in the universe. How can they be holding their ground?" It was becoming clear to the Zorathian commander that they had miscalculated. They had broken the universal rule, awakening humanity's spirit. Now, they were facing a force they didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, back on Earth, humanity wasn't backing down. Clara and her team fought their way through the streets, rescuing survivors and pushing the Zorathians back. As the battle raged on, humans everywhere felt the energy of their united will. The power of human spirit was undeniable, and no matter how advanced the Zorathians' technology was, they couldn't defeat it. The Zorathians thought they could easily conquer Earth, but they had failed to understand one critical thing. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their future. And that was a force far stronger than any weapon. As the sun set over Earth, the battlefield was far from over. But one thing was certain: the humans had proven that they would not be easily defeated. The galaxy's greatest mistake had been to underestimate the strength of a species that would fight to the very end. As the battle raged on, the Zorathians began to recognize that this was no ordinary fight. What they had thought would be a swift victory had become a desperate struggle for survival. Their once unshakable confidence began to crumble, and for the first time, they found themselves fighting not just for control of a planet, but for their own survival. On Earth, the tide was beginning to shift. In the midst of the chaos, the humans were adapting, learning, and evolving. They had always been a resourceful species, and now they were proving it in the most extraordinary way. Where the Zorathians saw outdated weapons, the humans saw potential. Where the aliens saw weakness, the humans saw strength. The most surprising aspect of the battle was the way in which ordinary civilians were stepping up. They had never been soldiers, but they had been pushed to the brink. They fought with the fury of those who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. The very survival of their species depended on their ability to stand together, and they were doing just that. In the midst of the war-torn streets, Clara continued to lead her group. Her once uncertain hands now gripped her weapon with fierce determination. She had seen the destruction and loss, but she had also seen something remarkable: the indomitable spirit of humanity. The way people, who had never fought a battle before, were rising to the occasion, inspired her every day. They weren't just defending their homes, they were defending their very essence, their humanity. "This is our time," Clara whispered to herself as she led her team into the heart of the enemy's territory. "We've got this." Meanwhile, in the sky, Earth's military forces were turning the tide of the aerial battle. The Zorathians, once so sure of their technological superiority, were now being outmaneuvered by human pilots who had an unexpected advantage. They had nothing to lose. They were fighting for their families, their homes, and their planet. The Zorathian ships, which had once seemed invincible, were being shot down one after another. The humans were proving to be more resilient, more creative, and more relentless than the invaders had anticipated. Back on the ground, Zarthok watched in disbelief as his fleet continued to falter. His once mighty armada was falling apart, and he had no idea why. He had expected the humans to fall back, to surrender or, at worst, to retreat in terror. Instead, they were pushing forward with an intensity that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. "We must regroup," Zarthok ordered, his voice strained. "Withdraw from Earth. We cannot risk losing any more ships." But it was too late. The Zorethian fleet, once a symbol of unchallenged power, was now retreating from a planet they had once thought of as easy prey. The Zorethians had underestimated humanity, and it was a mistake they would not be able to undo. The humans were not content to sit back and let the invaders flee, however. Clara, along with her fellow survivors, continued to push the battle to the Zorethians. They weren't just defending their cities. They were hunting down the invaders who had dared to threaten their way of life. The humans had tasted victory, and they were hungry for more. But just when it seemed like humanity was on the brink of winning, the Zorethians made a last-ditch effort to regain control. A massive Zorethian warship, the largest in the fleet, descended into Earth's atmosphere. This ship carried the Zorethian commander's final weapon, a devastating energy beam capable of wiping out entire cities with a single shot. The humans knew they had to act fast. There was no time to prepare a counteroffensive. They needed to act now if they were going to have any chance of stopping the weapon. The fate of Earth hung in the balance. Clara and her team were already on the move. She had seen the giant warship descend, and she knew it was only a matter of time before the Zorethians would fire their deadly weapon. There was no way to avoid it. If they didn't stop the ship now, the planet would be lost. She looked around at her comrades, their faces filled with fear, but also with resolve. "We can do this," Clara said, her voice unwavering. "We've come this far. We're not backing down now." With that, they charged forward, leading a full-scale assault on the Zorethian warship. The Zorethians, caught off guard by the sheer audacity of the humans, scrambled to defend their weapon. They fired everything they had, but humanity was not backing down. The human resistance was fierce, and the energy of the planet seemed to be on their side. For every blow the Zorethians struck, 100 humans rose to take their place. In the midst of the battle, Clara reached the heart of the Zorethian warship, where the energy beam was primed and ready to fire. She had only one shot at this. With her heart racing, she reached for the control panel, hacking into the system with the help of a few engineers she had gathered along the way. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The sounds of the battle around her faded as Clara focused on the task at hand. She wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for the future of Earth, for the future of humanity. She hit the final button. The Zorethian energy beam shut down, rendering the weapon useless. The humans had done it. Against all odds, they had stopped the most powerful weapon in the universe from destroying their world. The Zorethians, seeing their weapon neutralized, had no choice but to retreat. Their greatest weapon was gone, and with it, any hope of victory. For the first time in this battle, the humans had truly won. As the Zorethian forces retreated from Earth's atmosphere, Clara stood on the war-torn battlefield, her heart pounding with both exhilaration and disbelief. The once seemingly invincible alien fleet, their most powerful weapon neutralized, was now scrambling to escape a planet they had believed would fall with ease. But they had underestimated the will of humanity. The aliens had thought they could wipe out the human race in an instant, but they had learned a hard lesson that day. Humans were far more resilient than they had ever imagined. Across the globe, cheers erupted. People who had been hiding in shelters or battling on the front lines now stood together, feeling the weight of what they had accomplished. They had survived, they had fought back, and against all odds, they had won. But Clara knew this victory wasn't the end. Far from it. As the Zorethians fled, she couldn't help but feel a sense of unease in her gut. This was just one battle. The war was far from over. The Zorethians had come with overwhelming force, and their retreat was likely a temporary measure, not an admission of defeat. "They'll be back," Clara muttered to herself, her gaze fixed on the retreating alien ships, their dark silhouettes against the blue sky. "They'll regroup, and they'll come for us again." Her team, standing beside her, exchanged concerned glances. Clara wasn't wrong. The Zorathians had already proven how relentless they could be, and now they had seen firsthand just how dangerous humans could be when cornered. The alien race was not likely to forget the defeat they had suffered at the hands of a species they had deemed insignificant. But for now, there was a brief moment of peace. The war was on pause, but Clara knew this would not last long. Earth had bought itself time, but time was a luxury, not a guarantee. They had to be ready for whatever came next. As the world began to rebuild, leaders from across the globe gathered, putting aside old rivalries to form a unified front. They had seen what humanity was capable of when they stood together, and now they had to prepare for the inevitable return of the Zorathians. It wasn't just about fighting anymore. It was about survival, about ensuring that the mistakes of the past didn't repeat themselves. Clara, now a symbol of hope and resilience, found herself at the heart of the global effort. She was not just a survivor, she was a leader. And she knew that if they were going to stand any chance against the Zorathians, they would need to be stronger than ever before. They would need to unite not just in defense, but in the pursuit of a better future, a future where humanity could stand proud, no matter the odds. Meanwhile, in the Zorathian War Council, high above the shattered remains of their fleet, their leaders convened in silence. Zarthok, the Zorathian commander, had always been a believer in the overwhelming power of his people, but as he looked out over the galaxy, he realized something had changed. The humans had defied expectations, and their victory was no fluke. The Zorathians had always prided themselves on their military strength, but they had never faced an enemy like this before. "Prepare for the next phase," Zarthok growled, his voice laced with anger and disbelief. "We will return to Earth. And this time, we will finish what we started." But even as the Zorathians plotted their next move, they couldn't shake the thought that the humans had something the Zorathians could never comprehend. Something far more powerful than weapons or technology. The will to survive. Back on Earth, Clara and the resistance forces were not just focused on rebuilding. They were preparing. They knew the Zorathians would return. They had to. The enemy would not simply abandon the idea of taking Earth, not after everything they had invested. The human forces began to reorganize, combining their newfound knowledge of alien technology with their own innovation. They worked tirelessly, knowing that the next battle would be even more dangerous than the last. While Earth's military began training and developing new strategies, Clara took it upon herself to gather the world's brightest minds, seeking ways to defend Earth in ways no one had ever imagined. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology or their weapons. It was in their ability to adapt, to overcome impossible odds. Days turned to weeks, and weeks to months. The world began to change, becoming a place where survival was the priority. Cities rebuilt their defenses, nations forged new alliances, and humans looked to the stars, knowing that one day the Zorathians would return. But Clara remained hopeful. She knew that as long as humanity stood united, they could face anything. The aliens had underestimated them once. They wouldn't make the same mistake again. As the final remnants of the Zorathian fleet disappeared into the distance, Clara took one last look at the sky. The battle was far from over. But in that moment, she knew something the aliens didn't. Humanity was no longer just defending their planet. They were ready to fight for the future of the galaxy. The peaceful months that followed the Zorathian retreat were marked by quiet tension. The Earth, once ravaged by the enemy, now began its slow recovery. Cities were rebuilt, technology advanced, and nations came together under a single banner: survival. But beneath the surface of this growing unity, something darker brewed. The Zorathians were not gone. Clara had known from the moment they had retreated that it was only temporary. Now, as the months stretched on, the inevitability of their return grew heavier with each passing day. Clara stood at the heart of Earth's new military command center, now a hub of activity. Around her, Engineers, strategists, and military leaders worked tirelessly, preparing for the coming storm. The systems in place were better than anything Earth had ever seen, but Clara knew one thing for sure. It wouldn't be enough. The Zorathians won't be fooled again, Clara muttered to herself, her eyes fixed on the holographic map of the solar system in front of her. The map displayed their solar system in real time, with Earth at its center. Every alien fleet, every potential threat, was tracked, recorded, and analyzed by the humans' ever-growing defense network. But Clara's mind wasn't on the data. It was on the growing sense of dread she could feel in the pit of her stomach. They were preparing for a fight they didn't want but knew was inevitable. Humanity's greatest strength had been their willingness to sacrifice, to adapt, and to survive. But the Zorathians had never faced a challenge like this before. The human race had learned from the past, and now they were ready. Ready to fight back with everything they had. Yet there was something else Clara knew. They had to act first. They couldn't wait for the Zorathians to return to Earth again. They had to find them, before the aliens could regroup and strike with all their might. "Commander," a voice interrupted Clara's thoughts. It was General Hallstrom, the new leader of Earth's United Defense Force. He was an older man, his face lined with the experiences of war, but his eyes burned with determination. "We've detected something unusual, ma'am," he said, his voice urgent. Clara turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" "It's a small fleet, unidentified, but their trajectory suggests they're coming from outside the galaxy." Clara's heart raced. It was happening. The Zorathians were back. "Get me a team," Clara ordered. "We need to find out what they're planning. We can't let them get any closer." Across the stars. While Earth prepared for the worst, the Zorathian fleet was indeed on the move. Hidden deep within the farthest reaches of the galaxy, their new commander, Zarthok, had devised a plan far more dangerous than anything Clara and the human forces had prepared for. Zarthok stood in the war room of his flagship, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. The human resistance had stunned him. Their ability to unite, their drive to survive, had forced him to reassess everything. But now he had something that would change the course of the war. A new weapon. It was unlike anything the Zorathians had ever created, a weapon that could destroy entire planets in an instant. The humans had survived the first battle, but this new weapon would ensure they would never get a second chance. Zarthok was confident. This time, they would not fail. "We will end this," Zarthok growled, his voice a low rumble. "The humans will learn what true power is." The Zorathians had one rule, one principle that guided their conquest of the galaxy: to never underestimate an enemy. But now, Zarthok realized, this rule might be their undoing. The humans had already proven that they could adapt, that they could learn, and most importantly, that they could surprise even the most advanced species in the galaxy. Zarthok's thoughts were interrupted by a transmission from one of his officers. "Commander Zarthok, we've located the humans' primary defense fleet. They're preparing to intercept us. What are your orders?" Zarthok stood tall, his gaze hardening. "Prepare the fleet. Full speed ahead. We will not give them time to strike first. And when we find Earth, we will crush them. All of them." Back on Earth, the human forces were scrambling. Clara's instincts had been right. The Zorathians were back, and this time they were coming with a weapon that could obliterate them in one move. The newly united defense forces of Earth were on high alert, and every military leader was giving their all to prepare. Clara and General Hallstrom stood in front of the largest holographic map Earth had ever built. They could see the approaching Zorathian fleet, slowly but surely closing in on Earth's orbit. The clock was ticking. The plan had to work, or humanity would be wiped out. "We can't let them reach Earth," Clara said, her voice cold but determined. "We have to take the fight to them." General Hallstrom nodded. "We have the technology. We have the experience. We just need to believe in ourselves. Earth may be under threat, but we've faced worse, and we've won." Clara took a deep breath. It was now or never. They couldn't let the Zorathians make the same mistake twice. She turned to her team of top engineers. "Prepare the fleet. We leave in 1 hour." The next few minutes were filled with the sound of scrambling feet and the hum of technology being activated. The world's most advanced fleet was ready, and it was about to meet the most powerful enemy humanity had ever faced. The time for waiting was over. The war for survival had begun again. And this time, humans were the ones making the first move. The vast emptiness of space seemed to swallow everything, leaving only the cold hum of the human fleet's engines. Clara stood at the command center, staring out at the view of the approaching Zorathian fleet on the holographic display. The enemy had advanced quickly, almost as if they knew Earth would try to strike first. The cold, merciless power of their ships radiated through the display, and Clara could feel the weight of the situation on her shoulders. "This is it," General Hallstrom said, his voice steady but carrying the tension of the moment. "The Zorathians have made their move, and so have we." Clara nodded, her jaw tightening with resolve. She had always known this moment would come, but nothing could prepare her for the crushing responsibility she felt now. Humanity's fate depended on their next move. She glanced at the display, where the Zorathian ships were approaching, their fleet seemingly endless. If they unleashed their new weapon, Earth would be nothing more than a memory in the blink of an eye. "Clara," General Hallstrom said, interrupting her thoughts, "the Zorathians aren't just attacking. This is a full-scale invasion. We have to hold them back, or we won't have a chance to use the weapon we've prepared." Clara's mind raced. The Zorathians had shown no mercy the last time they faced off, and now they had something even more dangerous, a weapon capable of turning Earth into ash. But humanity had something they hadn't counted on: unity, resilience, and a thirst for survival that the Zorathians couldn't understand. "We can't give them the chance to use it," Clara replied. "We need to strike fast, hit them before they deploy their weapon." The command center buzzed with activity as the human fleet prepared for the final confrontation. Ships of every size and shape, from sleek fighters to massive battleships, lined up in space, ready to meet the enemy head-on. Clara's heart raced as she gave the order for the fleet to move out. "All ships, engage on my mark," she called, her voice ringing through the communication system. As the fleet surged forward, Clara's thoughts flashed to the first days of the war. It had all seemed impossible back then. An entire galaxy of advanced species, all of them descending upon Earth. Humanity had no business surviving, let alone fighting back. But they had, against all odds. Now, they stood at the precipice of victory or total annihilation. She couldn't let humanity fall now. The battle began with a deafening roar as the two fleets collided in space. Laser blasts and energy waves lit up the void, and the sound of metal scraping against metal echoed in Clara's mind. She watched as her ships engaged with the Zorathian forces, maneuvering around their enemy with precision. But the Zorathians were no slouches. Their ships were powerful, faster, and more heavily armed. Yet, as Clara watched the battle unfold, one thing became clear: the humans fought with everything they had. The Zorathians, though superior in technology, hadn't counted on the human spirit. Their ships shook under the force of human missiles, their shields faltering as Earth's forces pushed forward. Clara could see the fear in their movements. The humans were relentless. They were everywhere, attacking from every angle, and the Zorathian ships couldn't keep up. Clara's heart pounded in her chest as the flagship of the Zorathian fleet came into view. It was massive, a black behemoth that loomed like a death sentence. She knew that if they didn't destroy it, the battle would be lost. The Zorathians had to be stopped, and that ship was the key. "General Hallstrom," Clara said, her voice sharp, "we have to take out their flagship, or we're done for." Hallstrom's eyes were already on the battlefield, calculating the odds. "I know. I've already ordered the heavy bombers to prepare for the strike. We need to hit it with everything we've got." The Zorathian flagship unleashed a devastating barrage of firepower. It was as if the universe itself was on fire. Yet the human fleet held its ground, cutting through the Zorathian lines, pushing toward the flagship. But the Zorathians were not done. They activated their ultimate weapon, a massive energy beam that cut through space, targeting Earth's most vulnerable ships. Clara's eyes widened as she realized the scope of the weapon. If it hit Earth, it would be over. There was no coming back. "Clara," General Hallstrom shouted over the comms. "We need to stop it. Now." Clara knew what she had to do. Without hesitation, she gave the order. "All units, target their weapon. Take it out now." The human fleet surged forward, diving into the chaos. Clara could feel the intensity of the battle deep in her bones. The Zorathians were not going to give up easily, but humanity had never been known for giving up. The humans pushed through wave after wave of enemy fire, their fighters dodging, their ships retaliating with precision. And then, Clara saw it. The massive energy beam began to charge, its power growing with each passing second. She knew they had mere moments before the Zorathians unleashed it. "Fire everything," Clara commanded. The full force of the human fleet turned their weapons on the Zorathian flagship. It was an all-out assault. Missiles, lasers, energy weapons, and everything else the humans had at their disposal. The Zorathian flagship shook under the barrage, but it didn't fall. Not yet. Clara watched, holding her breath, as the flagship's shield began to crack under the pressure. And then, with a deafening explosion, the Zorathian flagship erupted in a burst of light and energy. The weapon was destroyed, and with it, the Zorathian fleet's advantage vanished. The humans had won, but there was no time to celebrate. The battle wasn't over yet, and the Zorathians were still a threat. But today, humanity had proven something. The galaxy had underestimated them before, but they would never make that mistake again. Humans had shown that, no matter what the cost, they would fight to the last breath. And they had won.